There are places at the bottom of the ocean that don't behave like ruins. They breathe. Waves glide over rocks aligned with impossible precision, and for an instant, the water seems to remind us of a time when the sea did not yet exist there. What if the cities we seek in the sky are asleep beneath the waters? What if what we call myths are just memories that the planet still keeps in the blue silence of the depths? There are those who say that history began 5,000 years ago, but the submerged rocks tell something else. They tell of civilizations that built temples before the ice melted, before the Earth's axis shook, before the Great Oblivion, the Cataclysm that changed everything. If you feel like certain things are no coincidence, maybe this video is what you needed to hear. The oceans cover 70% of the planet, and yet we know less about the bottom of the sea than we do about the surface of the moon. Under kilometers of dark water, cameras capture geometric shapes, steps, columns, corridors, and even when science tries to call them natural formations, something inside us hesitates, because there is a subtle difference between the erosion of time and the intention of a mind. Every stone carved beneath the sea is a voice that has survived oblivion. Perhaps they are not just ruins, but signs, messages left by a humanity that understood the earth as an organism alive, pulsating, in dialogue with the cosmos, a humanity that saw the sea not as a border, but as a mirror. Some nights the sound of the ocean seems like a forgotten language. It's as if the waves were reciting an ancient name, a name we no longer know pronounce. But something in us, perhaps the instinct, perhaps the soul, still recognizes it. When we dive in search of these sacred cities, we are not just exploring the archaeology of waters. We are trying to remember who we were before the fall, before the world split between heaven and abyss. There are records in almost all ancient traditions: Noah's flood, the sinking of Atlantis, the destruction of Lemuria, Mayan manuscripts, Hindu scriptures, Sumerian memoirs, all speak of a same event, a great global cataclysm that ended one era and began another. But what if that end wasn't just a tragedy? What if it was a rebirth, a portal that forced humanity to start over, forgetting for a while, wisdom, who are you now trying to find again? What was lost beneath the waters could be more than stone and sand. It may be a reminder of who we were before the fear. If something inside you is awakening, stay until the end. The answer may be here, hidden in the silent currents of a past that sea still guards. Before the world was covered with seas, the earth breathed differently. The air was denser, the magnetic field was stronger, and ancient civilizations walked between stars and oceans with a wisdom that today seems impossible to us. There were no borders, just centers of knowledge scattered throughout continents, connected by the same universal language: vibration. Ancient traditions speak of this era as a golden age. The Greeks called it the time of the gods. The Hindus, from Satya Yuga. The Egyptians remembered it as the reign of Netjer, when man and the divine were still shared the same space. And the Mayans said that the sun was closer, and that time moved like a spiral, not as a line. At that time, according to legends and scattered records, people knew the geometry of life. They built cities guided by the constellations, temples aligned with the sunrises, equinoxes, monuments that pulsed in harmony with the Earth's energy field. They didn't build their structures to defy the heavens, but to talk to them. Architecture was prayer, the stone, a silent song. On the coasts of India, scientists found ruins 40 meters deep, walls, staircases, and columns arranged in almost perfect symmetry. The site, called the Gulf of Kambat, revealed artifacts dating back more than 9,000 years, a time when, according to official history, cities did not yet exist. And yet, there were, beneath the waves, traces of a people who mastered engineering, astronomy, and the art of the invisible. The same echoes appear in Japan, in Yonaguni, a colossal set of submerged structures that defy all natural explanation. Steps, platforms, passages, sculptures that resemble human and animal figures. Geologists have tried to reduce everything to erosion, but experienced divers, independent archaeologists, and geometric scholars, Sacred Body noticed something undeniable. The proportions follow the golden number, the same one that governs the pyramids, the temples, and even the shape of our body. Coincidence? or signature of a common wisdom. Before the flood, these ancient cities were not isolated. There are similar remains in the Bahamas, the Azores Islands, the Mediterranean, and even on the coast Brazilian, where anomalous rock formations emerge only at extreme tides, as if the entire ETA had been a single map, and each point on it, a note of the same melody. But what united these civilizations? It was not trade, nor war, but the knowledge of vital energy. They knew that the universe is vibration, and that every sound, every shape, every movement of the wind carries information. Therefore, their cities were harmonious temples, designed to amplify the consciousness. Instead of metallic technology, they used resonance. Instead of machines, sound and light. In that era, human beings did not see themselves as separate from the cosmos. It was an extension of him. The body was a temple, and the planet, a living organism. The mountains were his spinal columns, the rivers his blood, and magnetism, the breath of a cosmic mind that sustained everything. But something started to change. The Earth's axis wobbled. The weather became unstable. Glaciers melted. Seas rose. Ancient texts describe this time with the same feeling. Fear. The priests saw signs of fire in the heavens, the stars changing position, and they understood that a great cycle was coming to an end. Some tried to preserve knowledge. They erected stone monuments, hoping they would survive the water. Others hid artifacts in underground chambers or sealed libraries in pyramids, like seeds left in the womb of the earth to germinate in the future. And when the cataclysm arrived, the tides swallowed entire cities, drowning stories, names, and memories. The planet has reset, and humanity, like an amnesiac child, awoke to a new dawn. Without remember who he had been, but the ruins are still there, and like the heart, the planet also has its scars. Every time we dive into these waters, we touch the echo of a previous world, a world that Earth has not forgotten, because the flood did not erase the truth. He just hid it under the blue veil of oblivion, and maybe now, we're ready to listen again, to remember not just what was lost, but why it was allowed to be lost. What would happen if these cities weren't just relics of the past, but signs what can we still become? For a long time, humanity believed that the bottom of the sea held only silence and darkness, but little by little, the waters began to return what they had hidden for millennia, as if the planet were ready to tell, in fragments, the story that fire and ice tried to put it out. The first clues came by chance. In 1986, Japanese divers exploring the coast of Yonaguni Island spotted something impossible: a stone staircase with perfect steps, wide landings, and right angles that were lost in the blue mist of the depths. When the images reached scientists, their astonishment was immediate. The formation seemed natural, but at the same time, too intentional. The lines were symmetrical, the proportions exact, and the alignment strangely angled, for the winter solstice sunset. For years, archaeologists have tried to classify Yonaguni as a geological curiosity, but as the investigations progressed, other structures began to emerge: platforms, walls, tunnels, reliefs in the shape of animals. The stones showed cut marks, horizontal grooves, clear signs of intervention human, and the boldest hypothesis began to take shape: that city could have existed before the end of the last ice age, more than 12,000 years ago. This date changes everything. This means that a civilization capable of building complex monuments lived before of the global flood mentioned in so many cultures. A civilization lost when the ice melted and ocean levels rose more than 100 meters, swallowing your back, your temples, and your memories. In 2001, the ocean gave away another secret. In India's Gulf of Khambat, scanning probes detected ruins at 40 meters in depth. What appeared to be just irregular relief turned out to be an immense submerged city. Blocks, squares, columns, portals, and canals. Fragments of pottery, bones, tools, and human artifacts were found dating back to 9,000 years ago, perhaps more. It was an entire metropolis, preserved under layers of sand and silence. Most surprising, many of its alignments correspond to visible constellations in the sky at that time, as if its architects had mapped the cosmos to reflect the sky on Earth. This harmony between the earthly and the celestial also appears in other submerged sites, from Bimini in the Bahamas to the mysterious structures of the North Sea, where the ancient Doggerland, the lost continent between England and Scandinavia. Doggerland was once a vast, fertile territory. There lived hunters, fishermen, and possibly builders. But around 8000 BC, melting ice caused the oceans to rise and swallow everything. Today, beneath the waves, archaeologists find human bones, tools, and the traces of rivers that once flowed under the sun. It's as if the map of ancient Europe had been redrawn by an invisible hand, a reminder that the story we were told is just the tip of the iceberg, literally, and there is more. In Egypt, beneath the waters of the Nile Delta, lie the ruins of Heracleion and Canopus, cities mentioned by Herodotus and considered mythological until they were found at the end of the 20th century. Temples, colossal statues, and stone vessels were rescued, confirming that the memory of submerged civilizations was not mere fiction. These cities were swallowed by a sudden cataclysm, perhaps the same as the text's Egyptians call it, the night of fire and water. There is a pattern emerging. Every culture holds an echo of destruction. The Sumerians speak of the flood of Ziusudra, the Hebrews from Noah, the Mayans from Itzamna saving the world from a raging sea, the Greeks from Atlantis swallowed by the waves. And now modern science, with its dating and bathymetry, begins to find the same chronology described by myths. Something colossal happened about 12,000 years ago. Theories vary. Some speak of gigantic volcanic eruptions, others from displacements of the Earth's axis, and there are those who point to the impact of a comet, the same event that would have ended the Ice Age and the Holocene began. The result was the same. Seas rising, lands sinking, entire civilizations disappearing. But perhaps the most fascinating thing is what these findings provoke in us, because each submerged city is more than archaeological evidence. It's a mirror. They remind us that nothing is truly lost. It just changes state, that ancient knowledge can lie dormant, waiting for our consciousness returns to a frequency capable of understanding it. Water does not destroy, she keeps it. It preserves in darkness what the fire would have consumed. Therefore, when we look at Yonaguni, Kambat, or Heracleion, we are not just seeing ruins. We are seeing a reflection of what we were, and perhaps what we will become again. Science still hesitates to admit this antiquity, but the truth is that stones don't lie, and the seas, even silent, have a voice that says, "You've been here before." Perhaps sunken cities are not ruins of a forgotten past, but portals to a memory that the soul insists on reopening, because what sank in the waters may one day emerge into consciousness, and what we call a mystery, maybe it's just the truth waiting for a heart awake enough to hear it. When we observe the submerged ruins, an inevitable question arises. Who built? And perhaps more importantly, what did these builders know that we have forgotten? For centuries, we have believed that human history began with the tools of stone and simple villages, but cities buried beneath the ocean tell another story, one that suggests that there was a humanity before ours, endowed with knowledge that today we call impossible. They mastered not just engineering, but vibration. They understood sound, frequency, and the power of form. They knew that matter responds to harmony, and that geometry is the language through which universe communicates. Look at the pyramids of Egypt, those of Teotihuacan, the ruins of Nan Madol, or the Yonaguni structures. Even though they are separated by oceans and millennia, they all obey the same sacred proportion, the golden number. They all align with specific constellations, Orion, Sirius, the Pleiades, as if were replicas of heaven on earth. This repetition is no coincidence. It's code, a code left by a civilization that understood the harmony between the macrocosm and the microcosm, between the human soul and the heart of the planet. Ancient texts say that these people do not measure time, but rhythm. They didn't tell time. They felt pulses. The sun, moon, and tides formed the compass of the world, and their constructions were instruments that resonated with this music. Some modern scholars call this sound architecture, temples that amplified vibrations, chambers that healed with echo, columns that transformed voice in energy. Sound was science. The stone, spiritual technology. Maybe that's why so many ruins are now submerged. The oceans covered the largest resonance, centers on the planet silencing them, as if Earth, upon seeing humanity's imbalance, had decided to put them to sleep, not for punishment, but for protection, because certain knowledge cannot be used when the collective heart has not yet learned to love. Traditions call these builders by different names. The Hindus called them Nagas, beings who lived between the earth and the waters, guardians of hidden knowledge. The Egyptians spoke of the Netaru, masters who came from the stars and taught geometry and cure. The Mayans resembled the Itza, those who came from the light. The Greeks, the Atlanteans, sons of Poseidon, lords of currents and energy crystal clear. Perhaps they were not gods, but men and women from an older age, when science and spirituality were still the same thing. Some legends describe that these people mastered the use of sound to move large stone blocks. Others, who understood the planet's magnetism and knew how to create fields anti-gravity. Although this all sounds like myth, recent research reveals that ancient stones, when exposed to certain frequencies, they actually vibrate, becoming lighter. It is possible that the secret of ancient engineering lies precisely there, in harmony, not in strength. But the true heritage of these builders may not be physical. Perhaps it is the silent teaching embedded in the proportions of his works, the idea that the universe is intelligible, ordered, and sensitive to love. Every temple, every ziggurat, every pyramid is, in fact, a mirror of the human body, with chambers that correspond to organs, passages that imitate energetic meridians, and apices that reflect the crown chakra. The ancients didn't build outside, they built inside, and each stone placed in its place was a note of a symphony between the human and the divine. But when the great cataclysm approached, this knowledge began to fade away. Fragment. Some masters migrated, taking fragments of wisdom to other continents. It was they who planted the seeds of later cultures: Egypt, Sumeria, the Andes, Indus valleys. Each one kept a part of the memory, and they all speak in some way of the instructors who came from the sea, survivors of the was earlier. Therefore, when archaeologists find sculptures of water gods or legends about submerged masters, are not faced with pure mythology, but with memory. They are echoes of the lineage of builders, the guardians of lost knowledge. And now, as the cycle closes and the world awakens to a new consciousness, their call resounds again. Maybe we'll be ready again to hear the music that once raised mountains and lit stars, and the sound that moved stones 12,000 years ago can, today, move everything that exists dense within us, the fear of remembering who we really are. The earth has always spoken, but there was a time when his voice became a scream, a sound so profound it echoed across all continents and sealed the fate of an era entire. It was the instant the balance was broken, the day the planet shifted to always. The ancients called it the flood. Modern science recognizes it as the end of the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago. The poles melted, sea levels rose more than 100 meters, and in a matter of centuries, maybe just decades, entire cities disappeared beneath the waters. But the ancient texts don't just describe a thaw. They speak of fire falling from the sky, thunder that ripped apart mountains, earthquakes, winds, darkness. Something deeper, more cosmic had happened. Researchers such as Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson suggest that a comet collided with the planet, fragmenting into several parts that reached the northern hemisphere. The energy released was unimaginable, enough to set entire forests on fire, melt glaciers, and alter the Earth's axis. The impact raised clouds of dust that darkened the sky, causing a global night. That lasted for years. When the sun finally returned, the world was different. The seas had swallowed continents, and the once mild climate had become unstable and cruel. The traditions of all peoples describe the same horror. The Sumerians speak of the flood of Zusudra, the Hebrews, from Noah's Ark, the Mayans, from the Great Drowning, the Hindus, of the god Manu being warned by a celestial fish to save the seeds of humanity. The Greeks report Deucalion's tears when he saw the sea cover the temple at Delphi. None of these stories are identical, but they all have the same structure: a warning, a destruction, a rebirth. If so many cultures separated by oceans remember the same event, perhaps not we are faced with myths, but with testimonies of a planetary trauma. The Earth, in its living wisdom, purged a cycle, and like every rebirth, collapse was necessary. Imagine the despair of the survivors, those who saw the horizon disappear under the advancing waters, who felt the ground dissolve underfoot. The world of their ancestors was over, and in the smoking ruins, they started from scratch. Some fled to mountains, others followed stars. They took with them fragments of ancient knowledge, stories, symbols, formulas, memories, and sowed the reconstruction of humanity. These remnants became the founding myths of subsequent civilizations. This is why the architecture of Egypt, Sumer, and the Andes bears echoes of the same ancestral mind, because they were born from the ashes of the same event. The earth was reborn, and with it, the human being, now separated. From his cosmic memory, amnesia was the price of survival. Science confirms that something colossal happened. Geological layers show traces of soot and glass microbeds, evidence of extreme temperatures. Giant animals became extinct almost instantly, and in the ice log of Greenland there is a sudden spike in carbon, indicating wildfires planetaries. Everything points to the same moment, the abrupt end of a global civilization and the beginning of our official history. But the cataclysm was, not just physical, it was spiritual. The planet went into mourning. The Earth's vibration decreased and humanity began to live in a state of deep forgetfulness. The disconnection began there, the rupture between mind and soul, between man and cosmos. And since then our entire evolution has been an attempt to remember what we lost. Maybe that's why we feel an inexplicable calling when looking at the ocean. There's an ancient nostalgia in the waves, as if something inside us recognizes that we came from there. Not from the waters of biological birth, but from the waters of oblivion, because everything that was sacred needed to submerge so that the new could be born. And now, millennia later, we are back at the same point in the cycle. The climate changes again, the glaciers melt again, and the earth begins to speak again, not to punish us, but to remind us. She is repeating the pattern, not to destroy, but to awaken. Perhaps the true flood was not that of waters, but that of oblivion. And the true rescue will not come from a wooden chest, but from a conscience capable of sailing through the tides of memory, because the cataclysm is not over. He just changed shape. Today it happens within us, and rebirth too. There is a reason why the sound of the sea is calming, because he speaks the language of memory. Every wave that hits the sand is a story trying to be remembered, an ancient vibration, perhaps before man himself. The ancients called the ocean the Silent Mother. They knew that he was not just a mirror of the sky, but the womb of time. It is there, in the depths, that the interrupted dreams of humanity rest. Temples, altars, entire cities that still emanate an almost living energy. Scientists call it acoustic resonance. Mystics call it remembrance. Water has memory. It records frequencies, emotions, words. When a civilization submerges, what is lost on the surface continues to vibrate below. That's why some divers say they feel a presence in the ruins, as if the sea still pulsated with the spirit of those who inhabited it. Maybe they are not ghosts but echoes, records of what we were. In all traditions, water is a symbol of purification and rebirth. In the flood, it destroys. In baptism, she saves. And perhaps these two gestures are the same. Because the ocean is not the enemy, it is the guardian. He did not erase the holy cities, just hid them until we were ready to remember. When we look at Yonaguni or the Gulf of Combat, what we actually see is not they are old stones. They are mirrors, mirrors that return our own forgotten image. There are physical proofs of something that the heart has always known. We have been more than we are now. We have been closer to the light, more connected to the earth, more aware of eternity that breathes in every atom. These submerged cities are portals, but not downward, inward, because the real dive is internal. Each layer of silence that we cross in the waters is also a layer of the mind that dissolves. And deep down, where everything is stillness and darkness, we hear what the surface cannot translate, the voice of the soul. Perhaps this is why humanity has always been fascinated by the sea. We built cities on its edge, temples facing the horizon, legends about gods and mermaids, monsters and redeemers. Deep down, we always knew that the sea is our mirror, It reflects the collective unconscious, vast, mysterious, indomitable, and every time we look at it, it's as if we see the universe itself looking back. Science studies its currents, the soul feels its calls, and they are both right, because the sea is at the same time fact and symbol. It is given and mystery, and everything he keeps is not really lost. It's just waiting for the right vibe to emerge. In moments of great change, the earth often whispers before it speaks. First comes the wind, then the rain, then the silence that precedes the new cycle. Today the waters move differently again. The planet is in transition again, and perhaps the ancient sacred cities will begin, little by little, waking up, not physically, but in us, because what submerges in the world resurrects in consciousness, and what the sea kept, the spirit now begins to remember. If this message touches something inside you, it's because, on some level, you too remember. Maybe not the cities themselves, but the feeling of belonging to something bigger, of having lived at a time when the human and the divine still walked together on the same sand. And if so, don't ignore that voice. She is the water itself calling your name. Perhaps the destiny of humanity has always been this: to forget in order to find again. Like the sea that collects the tides to return them in another form, life also the submerges to teach us how to breathe again. The sunken sacred cities are not just ruins. They are suspended chapters of a story that never ended. They wait, motionless, beneath miles of silence, until our eyes become clear, enough to see in them not a lost past but a future that still breathes. The planet is a living being. It moves, feels, and purifies itself. And when we forget to listen to him, he speaks across the waters. Each cataclysm is a reminder, not a punishment. It is Earth's way of realigning the human heart with its own rhythm. Perhaps the real mystery lies not in the submerged stones, but in what they awaken in us. Because when we look at the bottom of the sea, something inside our chest moves. It is the same impulse that made our ancestors build temples towards the sun, the same breath that makes us seek meaning in the infinite. If these cities really existed before the great cataclysm, then they are not just witnesses of an end. They are headlights, landmarks placed in the depths so that one day when we were ready we could follow its light again. And that day could be now, because remembering is not going back to the past. It's bringing it inside, integrating it, and allowing it to pulse again. Each hidden ruin is a reflection of what is still under construction within us. Each fallen stone is a reminder that everything that collapses can be reborn in new form, brighter. If this message found you, perhaps your soul is responding to a calling old, the same call that crosses ages, seas, and bodies, the silent voice that whispers, "Remember." If this journey has touched something for you, sign up and follow along with us. Your soul may be remembering the path. What if what we call the end is just the beginning of a memory that the soul has not yet forgot?